Next thing I'm going to talk about is that there's an epidemic of depression in young people, especially young women. And Jonathan Haidt has a good Substack on this, and he's talking about a observation by Greg Lukianoff, who noticed that in psychology, there's a thing called cognitive behavioral training. So it's a set of tools to train somebody to have better mental health. And I believe it works. Would you agree? Called CBT. Now, if you spend enough time on the internet, you might think CBT means something different, not cognitive behavioral therapy. Same as you don't realize that BBC is the British Broadcasting. So you may have some confusion about the CBT, but what it means in this context is cognitive behavioral therapy. And most of you would agree with the statement, if you've heard of it or you've used it, that it's a real useful tool. It's basically telling you how to reframe your mind to avoid depression. I talk about reframing all the time. If you see, and one of the key parts of that is teaching you to avoid catastrophizing, meaning avoid thinking that the world is going to be destroyed and every little problem is going to kill you. Avoid thinking that climate change is going to kill you personally. Avoid thinking that this or that is off the rails and it's the end of the world. Avoid thinking that, that. So that's part of CBT, is to avoid thinking it's the end of the world. Another is to avoid thinking that you're just a victim of things happening, but rather to reframe it as you have control over your life. Yes, everybody has good luck and bad luck, but you basically are the agent of your own life. And if you do that, apparently your mental health is much better. So, at about the time that young people started learning that they were victims in a world in which many catastrophes are happening or about to happen, they got mental illness, and the mental illness line just went shh. And the hypothesis is that the way kids are being taught, victims and victimology and the world is going to hell and climate change is going to fry you, creates, not only does it create mental depression, bad mental health, not only does it create it, but it's literally opposite of good technique, cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, let's bring this all back to something real. One of the biggest questions that I've been getting since I got canceled is, Scott, how you doing? How you doing? Are you okay? Like almost everybody came to me and said, are you going to make it through this? How's your mental state? Are you okay mentally? The entire time that people were asking me that, I kept thinking to myself, what are you talking about? I'm in complete control of this. I don't even know why you're worried about me. There was never a single point where I said to myself, oh, I'm a victim of things. I've described it. I've described what happened. But not once did I think I wasn't in control of it. I did the thing that caused it. I will now do the things that move me to some new place that I'll be happy with. And that it's all me doing stuff. That's my only view of the world. Now, is that an accurate worldview? Is that accurate? Not exactly. But reframes don't need to be accurate. Reframes do not care about what's true. They only need to work. That's a big theme of my now canceled book, which you'll see eventually. So you don't have to say to yourself, oh, it's a little bit true that I do some things, but it's also true that other people do things. So I'm trying to, understand it in its complexity. No, don't do that. Do not understand its complexity. You're in charge. Go do what you need to do. So you can't get two better examples of the fact that if you train people to have mental illness, they will. If you train people to reframe their condition as they're in charge, they will avoid some of that. I also don't worry about the catastrophes, for the most part. There was one that scared me, the supply chain problem during the pandemic. The supply chain problem scared me. I have to admit that one got me. But that was real. You know what I mean? That was real, and it was pretty short term, and it could have gone the other way. I still bet on the Adams law of slow-moving disasters, which we'd have just enough time to compensate and work through it, and we did. So the prediction was better than the way I felt about it. So I predicted correctly. I was pretty scared. I got to admit, that's the only thing I can think of in like the global disaster situations of my entire life. Although I think when I was 10 years old, I was afraid of a nuke from Russia. But between then, not too much. So, what do you think of the hypothesis? That teaching kids that they're victims, and basically their life depends primarily on what other people are thinking of them and doing, that is guaranteed to give you mental illness. I don't have to be a psychologist to know that. That's just obvious. It's obvious. So now bring it all together. Do you remember my bigger play when I was offending everybody with my hyperbole? It was to draw attention so that I could reframe the dominant view, especially in the black world and people who are allies of the black world, which is that looking backwards at who victimized you is not a good strategy. It's just not. But I was taking it from the point of view of not a good strategy for success, meaning it doesn't get you in the right place. It is also a way to make you mentally ill. I'm convinced of that it doesn't just make you less successful because it cuts you off from the statistically best ways to operate, but it actually makes you mentally weak. Now, have you noticed that events in the world are slowly starting to line up exactly the way I've been telling you that they have been, and that you can start to see my situation in a little bit of a different light now? It's starting to move, isn't it? Do you know why it's starting to move? Because I'm moving it. I'm moving it. I have complete control of this narrative. I'm on top of it. I'm riding it like a horse, and I'm going to take it where I want. Will I succeed? I don't know. I don't know. Am I crazy and sort of irrational because I'm thinking of it as something I can control? A little bit, in the sense that it's not technically true, like in a scientific way, right? But does it make me happy? Yeah. I only have good days. I honestly only have good days. I just don't have bad days anymore. It's like I've reframed it into my life. You know, unless I'm in physical pain or something like, you know, when I had COVID for a while, that wasn't the best day. But even when I had COVID, true story, you know, suffering along, I still had a whole bunch of good parts of my day that I, you know, was glad about. All right. Well, as the world comes my way, I just want to point out the big picture of what's happening there. Yes, I made a risk assessment. You know, this always is something worth pointing out. If somebody says, all right, I'm going to try to do something, I know there's a 20% chance it'll all go wrong for some specific reason. And then you try the thing and it goes wrong. And it goes wrong for that exact thing you said was a 20% risk. You still did the right thing. And you still knew there was a risk. So you're not like surprised or baffled why the bad thing happened. You knew it was a 20% risk. Yeah. As that's the way I act all the time.